Working closely with financial regulators to bring criminal charges against large financial institutions. Holder said in a video message posted this morning that, this is what he said, there is no such thing as too big to jail. All right, Judge Andrew Napolitano is here. All right, Judge, what's the legality of it? You can't send a person to prison unless they've broken the law. Right?
Right. I mean, what the political clamor is for is to see bankers in orange jumpsuits being perp-walked into a courthouse, or dressed the way we are being perp-walked into a courthouse, to satisfy the sort of populist lust for the belief that the banks did something wrong. The banks caused the mess in 2008. They're still rich and fat. This one guy just bought, as you pointed out, a beach house worth $147 million. Why aren't they punished? Why is it that big banks can pay these huge fines to the federal government and in return not get anybody indicted, fines that smaller banks and smaller companies could never afford, and they get indicted? That's the political perception.
You think that's a deal? Because Goldman, I think, paid $500 million as a fine.
Well, it
is criminal prosecution.
Okay.
So that's the deal?
It is unethical. And you could lose your license for a federal prosecutor to say, cough up this civil fine and we won't prosecute you criminally. Or to say the opposite. If you don't cough up this civil fine, we will prosecute you criminally. But there's a way to convey that between the lines and with a wink and with a nod.
Sure.
That if you're sending $500 million to the federal treasury, they're probably going to leave you alone. Is that fair? Because somebody else may have done the same thing and can't afford the $500 million, and they're going to get prosecuted. Now, having said that, there was something that Attorney General Holder said that I thought was extremely thoughtful, and I want to point that out. And he said, I am not unmindful of the damage that an indictment can do to a bank. An indictment is just an allegation. It is proof of nothing. It is evidence of nothing. But the very filing of the indictment could trigger behavior by federal regulators that could put the bank out of business, even if no one is convicted of a crime.
So why did he say that?
The greatest example of that is Arthur Andersen, not a bank, but an accounting firm. At the time, one of the big four. Mike Chertoff in the Bush administration filed an indictment, shut Arthur Andersen down. Arthur Andersen was convicted. 80,000 people lost their jobs. The conviction was overturned. There was no Arthur Andersen left for those people to come back to work for.
So why did Attorney General Eric Holder say that today? I am not unmindful of the damage that can be done to a financial institution by the allegation.
I think to justify what appears to be reticence on the part of the Justice Department. Normally, the Justice Department is heavy-handed, so heavy-handed, and this is typical of all Justice Departments. They will charge white-collar criminal defendants with more than they think they can actually prove, so that they have a bargaining position. In fact, almost all prosecutors do that. But for him to say, here's why we're holding back, because when we do this to a banker, it damages the system, and we are not after the system.
But hold on a second. Why? He's having it both ways.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about the same administration in the campaign stump that indicts the entire system.
Yes.
That in the campaign, that when they talk to the American public, they say that Wall Street is guilty, that your fortunes are where they are now because of the greed on Wall Street. The president says this outright every time he opens his mouth.
Well, this statement came out at 10:30 this morning. Did the people in the Justice Department who write these PR statements read the large story in yesterday's Sunday New York Times, which is the story of a banker and his travails in going to jail, and opines this is the only guy that ever did any serious time in the post-2008 crisis period?
I've got two bottom lines. I've got to get to them. Number one, you can't send somebody to jail in a financial situation unless they're convicted of fraud.
Right.
That is, fraudulently saying this security is worth X number of dollars and it's not.
That is the typical thing that the government has gone after people for, and that's what the politicians are clamoring for them to go after for as well.
And that's what they want now.
Yes.
Right. Number two, this is totally political. The Attorney General says this 6 months before an election because he knows that this is politically popular. People want to see guys in a perp walk. They want to see bankers in handcuffs go to prison.
Stuart, if the Justice Department indicts to quiet the political crowd, puts people in a perp walk for political reasons, that's reprehensible. It's unethical. It ought to be criminal in and of itself. But it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not. The act of an indictment is presumed valid, and there's no recourse.
You've got 10 seconds to get your last 10 cents worth in.
You know, I think that they thought maybe with Goldman Sachs and that $13 billion admitting that they did wrong, that maybe that would be enough. But the American public is still clamoring for someone to pay a price for this, and it is a great bargaining chip for politicians.
Where did Goldman Sachs get that $13 billion from? From the Fed. The Fed printed the cash and gave it to Goldman.
And they gave it back to the
government. It's the government's money, just making a circle.
You done?
Yes. I had to get that in.
Judge, always, thanks very much for jumping on this at such short notice.
Stuart.
Good stuff, man. Check the big board. We're flat, okay? Now, I'm mindful of the fact that when we opened up this morning, about an hour and a half ago, we were down 120 points on the Dow, and the question came up, what is this? Why? Why such a sharp sell-off? Is it Ukraine all over again, or is it a fresh look at Friday's, I say, rather poor jobs numbers? Charles, I say this is the economy that created that 100-point drop. What do you say?
I think it's a combination of things. In fact, I broke it down for you.
But is Ukraine part of it?
Ukraine's part of it. I believe it's 40%, I say, was the number out of China. Fourth consecutive month of retraction. The Journal has a great piece about China being the greatest threat to the market right now, greatest threat to the U.S. recovery than anything else out there.
Okay, so speed it up.
So I would say 40% China, 30% Russia, 20% jobs number, and 10% indifference. People just don't really know. We're down, they sell. We're up, they buy.
Oh, well, came back up again anyway. We're only down 17 now.